Today we're discussing this, Sony's new 50-150mm constant f2 lens. This thing is a monster, both in terms of size and optical performance. In many ways, it truly is one of the highest quality and most versatile lenses I've ever tested. It just has one major flaw. It's really expensive. Let's get undone.
Gerald Undone. He's crazy.
What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and I have a healthy barrel extension. So first up, for disclosure, Sony lent me this lens to make this review. Goes back when I'm done. They aren't paying me for this coverage, and they don't get to preview this video before it goes live. This video does have an actual sponsor, and that's Storyblocks. All right, let's take a look at the build and some of the features of this lens. We've got an AF/MF switch and a full-time DMF switch, which I like to see. And there's 3 of these focus hold customizable function buttons. There's an iris ring that goes from f2 to f22, as well as an A setting. And there's an iris lock switch for keeping it on the setting that you choose, as well as the ability to de-click that iris ring. And then of course we have a zoom ring and a manual focus ring. The manual focus is linear and seems to have a throw of about 140 degrees for my testing. And the zoom, as you can see, is internal. No barrel extension on this lens. There is a removable foot with a 1/4-20 underneath it. And the foot just uses a simple slide lock mechanism. The collar for that is adjustable so that you can change the position of it, but it is not removable. It stays fixed to the lens. It's just adjustable. And the front filter diameter is 95mm. And it comes with a hood, which does feature one of those little doors that you can use to adjust your filter if you put one on. But you should be aware that if you want to use the hood, you can only have a filter with a maximum diameter of 99.4mm. I got this from the Sony spec. Anything bigger than that, and the hood won't fit on. Also, 95mm is sort of a weird size for a filter, and I don't have any. So I usually stock 82mm filters, but I wanted to see what would happen if you used a step-up ring to put an 82mm filter on this 95mm diameter. And I didn't notice any vignetting. I didn't see it in the shot at all, actually. And I also took this photo with the filter on just to make sure that in photo mode, which has a different aspect ratio, that the filter wouldn't be seen either. And so you can use an 82mm filter, but those step-up rings are weird and special order and they kind of seem clunky. And if you want to use one with the hood, make sure that the total size of your stack is less than 99.4mm in diameter. Quick size comparison here. This is the 70-200 GM version 2, and you can see they're about the same height. The only difference is the girthiness of the new lens, which again, 95mm front filter thread versus a 77mm. So much thinner, and of course there's a weight difference that goes along with that. This new lens is coming in at 1,340 grams, so that's quite a bit, where this 70-200 GM2 is 1,045 grams, so 300 grams more on this lens. Also, I want to draw your attention to the switches here, which control OSS, and you'll notice that they're missing on this lens because there is no stabilization built in the lens on the new 50-150. Which is important because you're definitely going to want to use this on a camera with decent stabilization. I found from just using it without the tripod collar, just hand bombing it everywhere, that it's reasonably comfortable. Like, it doesn't feel that much different than having a 7200 on there other than the added weight. But what I did find is that if I was at 150 and trying to focus on some details, there's definitely quite a bit, and you almost got to, like, time your breath and pause and like adjust your shutter speed maybe higher than you would with the 7200. Because of that lack of stabilization. You certainly can get very sharp shots and you can certainly use it handheld, but I'm just warning you that if you're used to seeing a big white lens with stabilization, this one does not have it, and you can feel it at the longer focal lengths. Another comparison that's worth making is to the Tamron 35-150, and I'm pointing over here because the zoom lens on B camera has been the Tamron 35-150 for quite a bit of time. I really like that lens, but it's worth pointing out that although it goes a little bit wider, to 35mm, on the wider end, even though it's a variable aperture from 2 to f2.8, it's only f2 until like 40-ish millimeters. It's mostly a 2.8 lens. So it's difficult to compare apples to apples to a lens like this, which is f2 all the way throughout. And that's obviously why it's quite a bit bigger. Although the Tamron itself is big and heavy, it's like 1,165 grams. So heavier than the 7200, but still a little bit lighter than this. But again, difficult to compare because an f2 constant that goes from 50-150 is sort of a unique lens. But I guess the closest one in terms of my utility would be to the Tamron. But this lens also has more of a sports photography advantage to it, where with the Tamron, for 2 reasons. One, you can't burst shoot to the extent that you can with a first-party Sony lens. But also, the autofocus hit rate on the Tamron 35-150 has never been as good as, say, something like a 70-200. And this lens has even better autofocus for that kind of thing than something like a 7200. So if you want one that's going to be dual purpose, crash zooming in video, and then also you can take it out and shoot sports with it. This is definitely the better option, despite it being big, heavy, and expensive. Now, one thing that I thought would take the sting off the price of this lens would be putting a 1.4 times teleconverter on there, because then you would effectively have this lens and also a 70-200 f2.8 with the 1.4 times teleconverter attached, other than the fact that the lens would be even bigger still. However, unfortunately, you cannot use teleconverters on this lens. The rear element doesn't leave any space for teleconverters to be installed. Elaborating a little bit on those autofocus claims that I made, this lens is using 4 of Sony's fastest XD linear motors, the like floating maglev ones. And in my typical focusing from a close point to a far point test, at 150 millimeters, it was impressive how fast it was, like very, very fast. But at 50 millimeters, it might be the fastest focusing lens I've ever seen. It literally just it's instantaneous, the focus travel from one point to another. Incredible. But also the focus breathing on this lens is excellent, damn near perfect. Focus breathing, for those that don't know, is when it seems like your field of view or your frame changes as you focus from minimum to infinity. And you're not seeing a lot of it here because there isn't really any focus breathing. And this lens does have focus breathing compensation if you want to enable it. But as you can see, this is what it looks like with focus breathing turned off. And this is what it looks like with focus breathing turned on. Usually how much of the frame changes gives you an idea of how much there is to be corrected. And as you can see here, the frame barely changes at all. All right, let's jump into Lightroom so I can show you some sample images. But before that, let me tell you about Storyblocks, the sponsor of today's video. A stock media platform that offers unlimited downloads of diverse and high quality content for one predictable subscription cost. And more importantly, in this age of artificial intelligence, where an increasing volume of what we see online is generated by AI, Storyblocks is committed to providing authentic, stock content created by real artists that AI can't replicate. In fact, their library houses over 1 million HD and 4K video files, images, and motion graphics templates created by those real artists, including a continually expanding inventory of DaVinci Resolve templates that I've come to really appreciate. Plus, anything you download from Storyblocks is 100% royalty-free with clear-cut licensing, so you can focus on creating, not worrying about usage rates. The platform is incredibly easy to use, and the library is frequently restocked with commission content based on customer demand to ensure you'll have access to files that are not only high quality, but fresh and diverse. So to get started with unlimited stock media downloads at one set price, head to storyblocks.com/undone or click the link in the description. Okay, so first up, I want to talk about minimum focus distance and the parfocalness of this lens. By the way, all of these images were shot with the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II, which is 50 megapixels, I believe. For minimum focus distance on this lens, you're looking at 0.4 meters, which is 1.32 feet at 50, and then 0.74 meters, which is 2.43 feet at 150. And as you can see here, having that distance compensation makes it so that the reproduction of the Rubik's Cube in this case are pretty similar on both focal lengths. And if we punch into the center here, we can see that both are pretty equally sharp. I don't know that I could be able to pick a winner between these two. They both look excellent for their minimum focus, and there's very little aberration or anything weird going on. Now, although this lens does have an internal zoom, which is great, it is not parfocal. So what I did in this test is I focused at 150 millimeters and then zoomed out to 50 millimeters without refocusing and just took the photo again. And as you can see, it's a little bit soft. It's not perfectly parfocal. But then if we focus at 50 millimeters, you can see it gets really sharp. And then if we zoom out to 150 millimeters, you can see it doesn't keep its focus at all. So not great when it comes to parfocalness. Now you can use the autofocus of the lens because it's so good to compensate on slower zooms. The autofocus will keep up as you zoom to give the illusion that it's parfocal. Crash zooms though, if that's something you like to do, like shoot in the office, don't stay in focus. The autofocus lags behind by, half a second before it'll catch up with the zoom. Okay, now let's talk about chromatic aberration, specifically Bokeh, longitudinal chromatic aberration, which is color fringing on the out of focus areas to the foreground and the background. We've got it at 150 mil on the left and 50 mil on the right, shot at f2 because typically the only way to solve locus is by stopping down, so we want to see how it looks wide open. And you can see it's pretty similar at both focal lengths and that there is some chromatic aberration. Based on my experience with other Sony lenses, as well as much more expensive if you want to go and check out my RE Signature Prime video, this level of Bokeh for this type of lens is within the pass mark. It's not egregious. There is some, it is there. You will see it in specific shooting scenarios. But if you zoom out to a moderate degree like this, if the image looks mostly black and white, I generally give it a pass. And you can stop down to like f2.8 and a lot of it goes away. Here's some practical examples to also take a look at lateral fringing. If we take a closer look, we can see that, there's not much at all when it comes to color fringing, even against this bright sky. Looks great. Detail's really good too. Another example, we got a tree branch here. First of all, look at the detail. Look how sharp this is. This is the 150 at f2. Very, very little fringing at all. Incredible detail. This is impressive. One more example here. This one was close to minimum focus. I wanted to see if there was any kind of glistening aberrations. And you can see right here that there's a little bit of blue and orange on this chunk of the branch that's, out of focus to the foreground a little bit. But again, detail is really good for where it did focus, and there's not much lateral fringing around any of these objects. Let's take a look at Bokeh. And here it is at 50mm at f2. And you can see that the orbs look fantastic. Very smooth, very consistent. There's a little bit of texture on the inside. So not the greatest I've seen of all time, but for a zoom lens like this, some of the best zoom lens bokeh for sure. There's some cat's eye, a little bit of cutting in the corners you can see. If we stop down to f2.8, starts to round out pretty well. And then at f4, you get rid of it entirely. And also, f4, this still looks surprisingly circular. Even though it has an 11-bladed iris, a lot of lenses at f4 you can start to see, sometimes you can even see them at 2.8. But this one you got to go all the way down to 5.6 to even be able to sort of count the iris blades there. So that's really cool. And I have again at 150, it's pretty much the same performance at 150 or 50. That's one of the things that's great about this lens is the performance seems to be the same at 50 or 150 for reproduction. I have some portraits I can show you a little bit later on. It's very consistent throughout the zoom range, which is something that I really like about this lens. And the bokeh is no different. f2.8, f4. And then, like I said, I have some portrait examples here just of my son to show you the consistency between 50 and 150 and give you just sort of an idea of what the fall off will look like across the face. First of all, the detail is just insane and excellent. I mean, look at these little hairs and his eyelashes and everything. Really, 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 really good. Nice color, nice contrast. Excellent. That's at 50 f2. And another one at 50 f2. Again, the detail is, it's incredible. So now I'm going to zoom through. So 50, 79, and then 150. And you can see that, yeah, you have to, take a step back or a step forward, but the results you're going to get are very similar, which is actually handy when it comes to sort of just raw versatility of a lens. And there's just one more shot at 150. Took it outside so you can see some focus transitions. You can see at 150 at f2, you can really cream out the background if that's something that you're trying to do. You got really, really good detail along here. And that's how the fall off occurs across the face from eye to ear at a 150 f2 in this position. Here's another example, him eating a strawberry. Wanted to show you how punchy the greens and how rich the colors were and the contrast and stuff. And again, really, 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 really good detail. This is at 128mm. And again, I think this is very smooth, this is very natural, and it looks really good as it transitions from eye to ear. And just look at all these little peach fuzz hairs. It's just remarkably good in terms of just optical performance. It's very, very, very good. If you don't like looking at kids and you want to look at cats instead, here's my grumpy cat's face. He did not want to have his photo taken. Look at this guy. Urgh. But yeah, he too has excellent detail on his little eyes, his eyelashes. And then he decided to put the charm on. And some of these do justify the f2 over here. When I got the briefing, I was like, you went f2, eh? That's going to make it big and bulky and expensive. And it did. And I was thinking, why not just make it 2.8? But now that I've had it and used it for a while, I do think that the f2 brings more of like a portrait quality to the photos that would be lacking if they went for a 2.8 or an f4 version of this. And I know for some portrait photographers, they really like having, faster and faster options. So having the f2 on this lens gives it that versatility where it's not just, a fast sports shooter. It's also really, really nice portrait lens where you can shoot 50mm f2 and get really great results. So they have sold me on the concept for that reason, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still big, crazy, and expensive. So we got the 150mm at f2, and if we punch in the center, just incredibly sharp. The way I can usually tell is that if you can see the little crosshatch pattern on the card here, then you're getting that extra level of sharpness where a lot of other lenses will just kind of flatten it out. It's bonkers how sharp this is. And if we look up in the corner, it's still, you can still see every little dimple on the card. Incredible. But if we want to see, okay, are the diminishing returns the stopping down? So if we go to f2.8, the main thing you'll notice as I flip back and forth here is the vignetting goes away. f2.8 is your no vignetting zone. You don't really have to stop down beyond that. Look, if I go to f4, not really much changes. So f2.8 gets rid of the vignetting and also significantly improves the chromatic aberration if that's the type of shot you're going for. But sharpness is there pretty much all the way through. If we compare the f2 to the f2.8, It seems like a wash to me. Like maybe the 2.8 is sharper, but it's really hard to tell. And I'm looking at it probably bigger than you guys would see it. And if we look up in the corner, it's the same thing, other than the fact that the 2.8 is slightly brighter in the corner because of the improved vignetting. And all these images, as usual, don't have their corrections turned on. So vignetting and distortion will be as they will be without corrections, but usually corrections will improve these anyway. And with corrections, you probably wouldn't be able to tell a difference between these two shots. Let's take a look at 50mm, punching in the center there. Now, obviously this one's not going to be as detailed because of the, reach of the 150mm, but we can still make out some of those little dimples and cross-hatch pattern on the card there. It looks great. And up in the corner, not as good as the 150, but still pretty good. Let's stop down to 2.8, and you can see vignetting pretty much goes away just like at 150. And now our corner looks a little bit better because it's not as dim. But again, even if we compare f2 on the left to f4 on the right at 50mm, there's not that huge of a difference. Not really that much reason to stop down for sharpness. And same thing in the corner, it's mostly just the vignetting that changes. Taking a look at distortion, 50mm on the left, you can see there's a little bit of barrel distortion. Again, these are uncorrected. And 150 on the right, a little bit of pin cushion. Both are extremely minor and both will be easily corrected with profiles when the lens is released. Okay, now let's talk about Sunstars and Flare. This lens stops down to f22, which is great to have that big of a range from 2 to 22. Lenses like this, like fast 50mm f2s and 150 f2s aren't really, your Sunstar type lenses. So this is what it looks like pre-flare. So you can see how dark the blacks are. And then if we let the flare cut across the frame, you can see that the blacks are still maintained, very rich, very great contrast. And the flare is so subtle. Like there's a little bit here, a little bit there. You can barely see it. Another example with a different angle, just a little bit here, a little bit there, but really good. You don't lose contrast and you can hardly see any flare at all. And this is probably the best example of any Sunstars I was able to create. Okay, let's wrap up. This lens is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. The only two things you can really say about it is that it's big, heavy, and expensive. We've already talked about big and heavy, so let's talk about how expensive. In my briefing, I'm usually given a range. I was given a range of $3,500 to $3,900 US. For comparison, my 7200 GM2 on the shelf there, that one normally goes for $2,800 US. And you could argue that lens is just as versatile and have just as many applications and just as good as this lens, but it's $1,000 less. It's not f2 though. So when it comes to these, unique halo type products like this crazy f2 lens, then yeah, maybe that's worth $1,000 more. I guess really that's only up to you. It's hard for me to really tell you how to spend your money. But the Tamron 35 to 150 that I use all the time over here, that one goes for like $1,700, give or take. And you could also argue that in many ways, that lens is just as useful or as practical as a lens like this for $2,000 less. That diminishing returns graph, that's where we are with this lens. This lens is right at the very tippity top of that curve. And yeah, you can get yourself 85, 90, 95% of the way up that hill for $1,000 less, maybe 90% of the way there for $2,000 less. Here's what I will say. If you've got the money and you just want to treat yourself and you don't care about the price, you just want the best lens, then get this one. I sign off on it. It is truly excellent. But for the more value-oriented like me, I think I'll stick to my cheaper lenses and that get the job, 80, 85% of the way there for a lot less money. But if your goal was to make a lens that you were like, look what we can do, look how impressive it is, good job. You did it. All right. I'm done.